Well, for anyone who's going back and looking at, the statistics of that 1982 season, the first thing that's going to jump off the page to you is Rickey Henderson's 130
Sure.
stolen bases, which, I mean, in a modern context is almost mind-boggling based on, how it had almost been phased out of the game for a few years there. But as you're going through, as you mentioned, all those articles and newspaper clippings and kind of getting a sense for the day-to-day pulse of this building over the course of the season, like what was it really like to either watch Rickey Henderson live during that 82 season, or as he's getting closer to, oh, can he get to 100? Oh, can he get to 110? Is he going to break the record? Like, what was that like to some of our younger listeners who may never even sniff that 1982 season before?
That's a great question. I don't think there are certain athletes that you don't really appreciate how good they are at the time. And I think you have to look at them from a historical perspective. And I actually, to plug my own blog, did a post where there was about a 7-minute clip from the playoffs. I think it was 89, the ALCS with the Blue Jays and the A's, where I broke down sort of just how, and to be honest, and I want to give credit where credit's due, I kind of got the idea for this post from the Howard Bryant biography that he did in part with Rickey. But it just talks about how disruptive Rickey was as a player. He had a small strike zone. He crouched down, sort of like Pete Rose did in the day. But I mean, again, if you're a pitcher and if I'm pitching to Rickey, he's got a small strike zone, and he can hit the ball out of the ballpark, not so much in 82, but later in his career. But on the other hand, if I walk him, it can be a triple in 2 pitches.
Yeah.
And so he's so disruptive at the plate with in the back of your mind, the threat that he's going to be disruptive, potentially more so, probably more so on the bases, which could all of a sudden you can walk the guy and it's going to turn into a big inning because he's going to keep you off of your game. And so you kind of have to pick your poison. Do I really bear down and try to get him here, knowing again that he could hit the ball out of the ballpark, or he could hit the ball the other way for a single and then steal second and third. And so there's no really good answer to that. And there's no good way to really get him out. And I mean, in my opinion, head and shoulders the best leadoff hitter in the history of the game. I don't think there's anybody close. So I don't think there's anybody that you can compare him to now, because to your point, nobody's stealing 100 bases, 130 bases in a season. No one's going to steal 100. I mean, Acuna is, having a great season, but again, he's not going to get anywhere near 100. And then again, later in his career, he was capable of hitting the ball out of the ballpark kind of at any time. I think he holds the record for leadoff homers in addition to stolen bases and runs scored. And so what do you do with a guy like that? I mean, he's sort of a combination of a lot of, of Acuna and I don't know, I don't want to throw names out, but I mean, a guy that's just extremely tough to deal with as a defensive, as an opposing team. And he just stresses you out, I mean, how do you plan for him? So he was amazing to watch. And again, the one thing I've noticed too, is as I've gotten older and you learn more about the game and you talk to more guys and you read more books, is to really get into it on a granular level. And in that blog post I talked about, I literally go pitch by pitch of when Rickey's up and then when the other people are up and what's going on with Rickey while these other people are up. And that's what really shows you how much he disrupted the game.
Yeah. Well, as he's approaching this historic, base stealing feat here, there was some sort of, I don't know if controversy is the right word, but there is some feathers that were ruffled as he was getting towards that total there, because wasn't it that they wanted him to break the record at home? So,
right.
But someone was on base ahead of him, so they tried to intentionally get him picked off so that he could steal more bases. Like,
so they were playing the Tigers. It was the last game of a road trip. I'm sorry, of a homestand. And they were going to go on the road, I think, for 10 games. And so Rickey is one stolen base away from the record in, I think, the 7th or 8th inning. And a teammate of his is ahead of him on base. Rickey draws a walk. So the Rays have first and second. And if they do a double steal, if they're both safe, Rickey doesn't get a credit, or Rickey gets a credit for a stolen base. But Mike Stanley, I think it was Mike Stanley, I think he had fewer stolen bases in his career than Rickey had in April of '82. So if Stanley gets thrown out at third, Rickey doesn't get credit for the steal on the back end. And so basically what Billy Martin had Stanley do is take a big lead off of second base and try to get in a rundown and get picked off so that free second base so that Rickey can steal second. Sparky Anderson realized what was going on and told his guys to not, to just let Stanley kind of wander off. And there's this they're throwing the ball around the infield, but no one's really doing anything. They finally tag Stanley out. So then Rickey has a free path ahead of him and he steals the base and from most accounts or all accounts gets in pretty safely. And the home plate or the second base umpire rings him up, and so then becomes this big argument of, the umpire is trying to interject himself into the game. And, later on the umpire says, well, I don't, basically not in so many words, says, I don't want, if you can steal 129 bases, you can steal the 130th one legitimately. Actually, I think Sparky made that argument. Sparky Anderson also said, called it, one of the biggest travesties ever. So it became this big to do. And then the A's end up going to Milwaukee and Rickey steals a base in Milwaukee to break the record. And even the fans in Milwaukee are yelling for Rickey to steal because they wanted to see history.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting moment and one of those little fun moments that kind of sometimes gets lost over the course of a season. And so those are the kinds of things that I love to talk about. I love digging. I love the little nuances, trying to find something kind of small and blow it up, or at the very least stretch it out and make the narrative fun for the reader.